Okay, now that you know a little bit about the history of the Myers-Briggs, we're going to talk specifically about types, and each video will focus on a different component of type. So we will start today with the E or I, extroversion or introversion. So the extroversion slash introversion component of Myers-Briggs type is all about how we direct and receive energy. So it's really like, how do we kind of show up in the world? How are we perceived by other people based on that energy? Do we live in an inner world or do we live in an outer world? And so the extroverted type tends to not only live in that outer world of people and ideas and communication about those things, but they also direct their energy out. And they are energized by the people and the ideas and the activities that are happening around them. So people who prefer introversion direct their energy inward. They are energized by the thought and the reflection and the time sort of spent living within that intrapersonal world, the communication that takes place within that individual. And so with these types, we might kind of think about it in terms of some stereotypical components. The extrovert appears to be very extroverted. They tend to be like really engaged and enthusiastic and active, and they communicate a lot. They're not quiet. That's sort of the stereotype, right? This is the person who at the party is in the center of attention. They're dancing on tables, they're telling stories, very lively. And the introverted type is taking all those things that are happening outside of them and they're containing them within. So they tend not to appear to be all the things that we see in the extrovert. And what happens as a result is extroverted people might see an introvert and think that they're shy, or sometimes they can appear to be standoffish. And that's not the case at all. Introversion is not synonymous with shy. Introversion is really the tendency to need to take more time with information and sometimes to not even express that information, but to just let it sit inside. I think of it like if you're interested in cooking and you like food, the introvert marinates everything, right? Give it time to develop flavor. And the extrovert's like a quick and dirty, throw it on the grill and get it done, and it's still going to be delicious. It's just a very different way of cooking. So the another way we think about introversion and extroversion is how we recharge the battery. The extrovert is going to want to recharge their battery in social scenarios. They want to go out after work or school or even social things, right? If they're at a party, they may want to keep on with the partying, like let's go to the after party or let's go out and grab some burgers, and like they want to keep hanging out and socializing. The introvert is generally quite tired at the end of a day of socializing. So at the end of work, if you're an introvert and you're at work all day, the extrovert's like, hey, let's go out and grab an after dinner drink, or let's go get some coffee, or hey, do you want to come and hang out? And the introvert's like, I do not. I'm so tired. I just want to go home. And they may not actually even feel physically tired, but their brain is tired from having to extrovert all day. They just want to be by themselves. Like to the introvert, going home and cuddling with the dog or cat or reading a book or just sort of quietly, introverted artists, for instance, will love to go home and just draw or paint and be creative. And so how they recharge their battery is very, very different. So what we've been doing is talking in generalities about type. These are sort of more stereotypical versions of what introverts and extroverts look like. But what makes an extrovert, what makes an introvert, are 5 key facets that are very much like in detail described in separate handouts that you'll find in the Myers-Briggs folders of Blackboard. I need you to read those handouts. I'm not going to talk through all the details of them. I'm just going to give you a very quick overview here. But the expectation for the personality paper is that you will extract tidbits of information that essentially tell me why the facets that you've chosen make sense to you and how they impact the relationship. So I'm looking for very specific reference points. So this video is going to help you understand it. The handouts are going to help you understand it a whole lot more. And each handout's going to cover one of the two spectrums. So initiating and receiving is one handout. Expressive contained is another. They are each 1 to 2 pages, no more than 2 pages. And it's rich information, but what I encourage you to do is to highlight the parts that stand out to you as like being, oh, that's me. Or if you're talking about the relationship with your romantic partner or your best friend or your mom or your dad or somebody in your life, you can highlight the pieces that you think stand out the most about them and then see, okay, are there similarities here or are there differences? How does that impact the relationship? So the initiating and receiving facet is essentially the broad and general description of a person's basic orientation to communicating and connecting to other people. The initiator is the one who starts the conversations. The receiver is the one who lets people start the conversations with them. The expressive and contained components. This is all about communicating an emotional state, feeling, or experience. So the expressive type shows that. They tend to show emotion on their face. They tend to talk about how they feel or explain their experiences. They don't have a problem confiding these things in other people and therefore seem really easy to get to know. The contained type tends not to share that as easily. They only tend to share that information, again, feelings, experiences, how they feel currently, their emotional state. They only share that with the people they trust the most. And that can make them seem a little harder to get to know, particularly with an expressive extrovert, because all of those emotional responses that the expressive extrovert feels on the outside are happening on the inside of the introvert. So it's more contained. The third component is gregarious and intimate. This is all about the breadth and depth of communication, of connection with other people. So it's the kind of friendships that people have. Gregarious types tend to enjoy a lot of different friendships. They have circles of friends that maybe are very, very different. Like, these are my work friends, these are my school friends, these are my neighborhood friends. And they may not interact, but the person who's gregarious is fine with that. They like having these differences in their friend groups. And they're really good at communicating in all of those different groups. They don't feel awkward moving from one to the next. And if all of those groups were to get together, like at a party or something, the gregarious type would be psyched at the challenge of having everybody communicating from these different components of their life. The intimate type tends to prefer a very limited circle of friends and tends to really create friendships that are based on like interests that they have in common. Because for the introvert and the intimate introvert to talk to people when they don't have much in common, it's so much more of a challenge, right? They have to find things that they can connect on. And if you just have things in common, it makes it so much easier to have those communications. So they do prefer to be in one-on-one or small group settings as opposed to large group settings. And they definitely are going to have a smaller friend group overall. The active and reflective types, this facet focuses on how a person engages with their environment in terms of socializing, learning, and entertainment. And so the active type gets directly involved. They want to do it and they want to talk about it as they're doing it. So if you think about, for instance, working with a small group in like a lab science or in a group project in class, the active type wants to speak out loud the whole time about the process and talk through different components of the process, and then also like get their hands dirty right away and get in there. And the reflective type struggles with that. Oftentimes, when we create small groups of people in a lab science or in a group project in class or at work, we're not thinking about personality types. But there may be something to that. If you have a group of introverts working together, it may seem really quiet, but it doesn't mean they're not doing the work. When you have a group of extroverts working together, it's going to be really loud and boisterous. It doesn't mean that they are doing the work. It's difficult for a reflective type to be thinking and having all of these internal responses when people are talking around them and engaging. The extrovert's just going to jump right in and start doing it, and the introvert may have another idea, but they need to think about it first. Remember, they're marinating, and so it takes time to develop flavor and marinate. You can't just jump right in, and the introvert's going to really struggle with having their voice heard in that environment. And the last element is the enthusiastic versus the quiet. Again, I realize my closed captioning is covering this up, but I will explain it through. And so this facet focuses on the kind of energy that people bring to their exchanges with other people rather than the content. So it's not about what they're talking about, it's about how they are communicating. So the enthusiastic type appears to always be sort of at the center of attention. They tell stories, they're lively, they use a lot of nonverbal communication like hand gestures and facial expressions, and they're not afraid to engage with other people quickly and easily, and so they appear very extroverted. And the quiet type appears to be very opposite of the enthusiastic. They are reserved. They're having a lot of internal reactions. So, like, as they're watching the enthusiastic extrovert communicate, the quiet introvert might be thinking, like, wow, that's a lot of extroversion. Like, this person is over the top. I identify as an enthusiastic extrovert. If you've ever seen me teaching in person, you know that that's how I show up. I walk around the room and I use a lot of hand gestures. And so as an enthusiastic extrovert, I know a quiet introvert's watching me and going like, wow, that's a lot of nonverbal communication. And I'm also using tone of voice and, like all these things just kind of come across. I do not appear to be reserved. It doesn't mean that I'm not having a lot of internal dialogue, but my internal dialogue moves through my mouth much more quickly than a quiet introvert. They are having a lot of internal reactions that they need time to determine if they're going to bring out and into the open. Okay, so these are the facets. Again, there's a lot of detail in those handouts. I really encourage you to read them through, highlight the things that make the most sense to you and in your relationships, and then utilize that information to help you write your paper. As always, please contact me if you have any questions.